All right, welcome back to another episode of Wild Medicine. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Paris, and I have a really amazing conversation geared up for today. I am so excited about having conversations again on the podcast. I had taken a bit of a break from that. And man, has it been really fulfilling. And I hope you've been enjoying the conversations thus far. And this one is going to be at that same level. This is a phenomenal conversation. This week I have Jill Drader on the podcast, and she is the creator of the Owl Seek Method and the newly published author of her book, Knowings. And this is an amazing conversation. And we connected in a mastermind. And from the second I met her, I was very excited to get to know her better. And so we just recorded our first conversation and threw it on the podcast. And just as I expected, this was a profoundly fascinating, interesting, and eye-opening or expansive conversation. I think you're going to really enjoy it as well. We talk all about intuition and getting to know that part of yourself of where you can take action from. She's all about taking responsibility, knowing what's best for you, and navigating this in a way that is in alignment and in coherence with what you actually desire and what you actually need to be doing in a world that we put a lot of our reliance on other people or in strategies or whatever the thing may be, to come home to ourselves and to really seek wisdom and take that next step. We talk everything from intuition and spirituality and religion and her methodology and framework. And she even reads parts of her book around shadow work and, this dichotomy between logic and intuition and masculine and feminine. And I think you're going to love this conversation. So without further ado, I welcome my new friend, Jill Drader, to the podcast. All right, Jill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I am honored that you said yes to coming on. I know that you've just recently published your book, which I want to talk at great length. How I found out about you is that we're in the same mastermind group. And I can just say that what I've observed is, one, you're an incredibly intelligent and wise woman who's lived what I just said is 18,000 lives. You're generous with information and your intuitive insights. You share them. And instantly I felt very connected to you and wanted to know more. And so I thought, let's have that conversation on the podcast and record it, because I just think you have insights and wisdom that would be of massive service to my community and resources for women who are listening to learn more, women and men, but I particularly talk to women. So without further ado, can you give us a bit of your backstory and how you got to creating the Owl Seek Method and an author? I want to know the backstory.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on and inviting this conversation to see and hear things differently. Because when we get into these masterminds, I think we come in together where we're both incredibly independent, incredibly powerful, family-centric people, community-centric people. And then we have the stuff we want to talk about and we want to dive into that's really deep within us. So those kind of opportunities with people at our level to find that connection, especially across the country, is just a gift in itself, because it's so rare to be able to talk like we talk and share that. So when I decided to put Knowings together, 7 intuitive principles to a life of certainty, it was to encapsulate what I've been talking about into my own body of work. And I wanted a body of work that I could teach from and use as kind of a workbook and guide for those who were coming along on this journey with me through recovery or through change or through transformational change of their thinking. And this has been happening for me for almost 2 decades, where I found myself leading people to think differently, whether it was in small groups or then workshops and then coaching models and then creating different curriculums for retreats. And those were all part of my journey. So I would open myself up on my own. And for me, a lot of it was around recovery and having had a substance use disorder and having to explore what I needed to do to build my life again. So 20 years ago, I had an addiction to alcohol and cocaine. Almost 19 years ago, I put that down. And I've been living sober from those 2 substances, but I am a cannabis user. So I also talk about that journey of what it meant to be in a pathology model for medications to manage my mental health for years and feeling off, and then finding what worked for me, but having to go against the grain of story of what abstinence meant to work or sober meant to work, and feeling a sense of belonging in myself and being okay with myself and knowing it's a better option than what else I had. And I think what I had to do was go through ebbs and flows and phases of my life and stop living the lie and the mask that society wanted me to have at each level in that. And so the courage to be comfortable about talking about what works for me and how is what came into this. That's the community I invite. It's non-judgmental. It's not predetermined. I talk about my journey in there through psychology and counseling for years to deal with addiction and then trauma and then sexual assault traumas and different things that come up in the body and in the mind when it's time to deal with them. And I don't think there's a framework approach. I don't think pathology has the answer. I don't think psychology has the answer. I don't think spirituality only has the answer. I think each person needs to dive in when they're ready and make a pie chart of all those things and put in the pie chart where they're at in this season of their life with those things. And hopefully it's different than it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, in the spirit of like the necklace with the Fibonacci sequence on it, you start at a point and then it expands and grows. And hopefully your journey is built off a starting point where these kind of incremental increases as it expands are also your experiences. And from that, we can tell stories of overcoming and feeling different and feeling outside differently. So that's the encapsulation of the body of work. At the beginning of COVID, I found myself suddenly alone. My marriage had ended and there was a new relationship on the other side of that. It was with somebody I knew. It was another person who was in our community. Our kids were the same age. So I call it like the instant Disneyland blended family popped up and everybody was free of work, free of time. And this rise of this new blended family on the other side of me on my own was something I had to look at. And so I had my own place and I went through 65 journals I've kept since I was 8 years old. And they're all in this like wicker cabinet back here in my office. And I read them chronologically of my life. And it starts at 8 years old in this little like blue bunny journal where I'm like writing so hard with the pencil, it's going through the pages about being mad at my parents and stuff like that. And swearing for the first time and like my first closed book and getting that stuff out. But what the journey went through was I didn't know I was chasing boys really young. And then that turned into codependency and attachment, almost a drug. And that formation of what relationship was for me was either from this religious upbringing I was around where it was traditional in a way of what marriage looks like and what it is and what it means and how you're supposed to be. And that never felt like it fit for me. Like it never felt like I fit into that story. And then I was on my own and seeing how people do relationships differently. And you just never really know what you want. But I never also knew where I fit. And so with that, that's been the piece to really dive into. And in the book, in chapter 6, I call it The Shadow. And I said, as I read through my journals of me trying to make it in the work world, I realized how plagued I was by fear and comparison, trying to control and force myself into an environment where I didn't belong, staying despite how I felt on the outside. It's not that people there didn't accept me. It's like I was trying to conform to them and I didn't like what it represented. So I didn't like me for trying to be like them. Then my pendulum would swing too far to the other side and I would hook, forcing myself to stay there, forcing myself to conform. I recall as early as 14 years old, never ever being comfortable in a group of friends. Whether I didn't feel like I had the same Club Monaco sweater or the same rec club membership or parents who were all the same as the others, I felt like an odd duck as a teenager and I was scared to mix. But I was courageous. I always listened within, even then, and found signs and clues to help me move closer to where I wanted to be. I felt like other people had parents that helped them, guide them, choosing schools or sports or after-school activities, but I never felt like I had that. I never felt connected, not to myself, not to my parents, not to my community, and not to my friends, nothing. But I did feel connected when I'd talk to myself and somehow the answer would come, a guide, something I could trust to take me on my way when I didn't think other people were. There was hope, there was comfort, and there was light. But this was a different voice than the chase. The chase voice is a whisper of the dark side, the shadow side, the side that makes you feel like you aren't good enough. And so what I had to come to understand was discernment of thought is in each breath. In a millisecond, your light, right knowing, your light, right answer will be contradicted. And the dark side will come in, whatever you call it. Religious people call it the enemy. They call it that attack place. And other bodies have different beliefs for what it come from. In Islam, that's why they put on the eye, and it's to project that out. It's always around us, but when you wear the evil eye, then you cast that out. So as so long as you're wearing it or it's in front of your door, you cannot invite that evil in. And we need to understand within ourselves, where's that sign? If it's not a physical object sign, what are we doing to know the feeling of when that comes in? And it's not something we get through. We are going to be in this for our whole life. And we need to understand discernment is a very religious term where we feel within the right or the wrong, but where's the knowing, or where's the brain and the stomach telling us? Or people have all kinds of different languages for it to get that flutter of knowing.
So I so relate to so much of what you just said, and this could go many ways, but I assume that's how then you wound up discovering your owl seek method. So can you talk to us about how it is coming from a religious background, feeling like you don't belong, feeling like there's the mask, then in the corporate world where that plays a role, where in partnership that plays a role, how you were able to figure that out for yourself, and now you're leading others, I assume, in helping, tap into this innate wisdom, which is everything we try to accomplish with rewilding ourselves as well in wild circles. So how did this come about for you?
So when I was in that place of being alone, I needed to find the new community. Suddenly the summer house where we used to go for a decade wasn't mine anymore. Suddenly that landscape wasn't mine anymore. Suddenly I didn't feel like I wanted to rebuild there the same. And the owl seek method came during that time of lockdown. I could really only go in the forest by myself quite a bit. And then I started seeing owls. And I hadn't seen owls a lot before. I'd heard owls, but I hadn't sought out finding them. A few years before I did this with grizzly bears, and I knew they're out in the mountains here. I'm in the Rocky Mountains, and I was like, I want to see more of them. And the more I turned my attention to them, I'd put postcards up in my house. I'd imagine seeing them before I go out. I would. And that was the goal. So I was like, okay, when we turn our attention towards wanting to see something, even out here in the Rocky Mountains, I can be like, I want to see a grizzly bear and I'll go for a drive and I will. What is that piece of that logic and intuition meeting where I know I want to see one and I'm putting it out there to see one and I will see one? And who do I thank for that? And so as I kept diving into this manifesting, attraction, law of attraction, call it what we will, I call it knowings, a deeper connection to self. When I'd find the owls, it would look at me and be like, I've been watching you look for me for 20 minutes, almost like you idiot. And it was like, okay, there it is. And then I'd go into like, okay, so it looks like the trunk. It's the same shape as the trunk. So when I'm looking for another one, I need to be looking around the trunk. And these metaphors for life started happening with how I needed to transform and change even at home. What do I need to see differently here? What do I need to see from another angle here? And the owl seek method was developed as I was walking in the forest. And you're kind of scared, but it's a healthy fear. Like I have had enough happen in my life for humans to actually have cause and harm to me, that I don't fear that kind of fear of the wild. Yes, I have protection and tools and bear spray and all the things in case. The same tools I equip myself with downtown Calgary here, which is just as wild animal nature at times. I take that challenge of healthy fear and equipping myself to be there very seriously, because you're not going to get to the next level unless you get out of your own cage and you go there. So I found a new region, southern Alberta, Crow's Nest Pass, where there's crows and nests. And when you go in the autumn season and winter, all the leaves are gone and those nests are in the middle of these massive trees. And I thought, wow, that higher perspective of just getting to the nest, you see the landscape differently. Like you see the horizon differently. You see what's in front of you differently. If you can't see the path from down here and you were to go to the nest, we're constantly looking like this. But what if we were to go to the nest and look out? And so that's that shift of perspective. So the nest represents that heart-centered place for yourself. The owl is the wisdom speaker there, the knowings. So for anyone who has a religion, they might go to a church to talk to God. That would be the nest and the owl. For anyone who has a religion that they pray 5 times a day, you might go to the nest 5 times a day to seek that guidance and wisdom and meditative asking and receiving, to surrender and invite in. That's what this is asking you to do. Do you carve time for yourself during the day to tune into your own knowings, to your own discernment, to get to that nest? And who are you listening to there? So some people have this practice, but I challenge, if this has become like, I write, the Lord's Prayer for me came over this squeaky microphone in our school. We'd have to stand beside our desk, and then some secretary would like glip the thing and drop the phone and then come back on, and they would press play and hold the phone to the tape recorder probably. And we mechanically, in memorized faith, rambled through it. Mm-hmm. If your faith in your nest has become memorized and ritualistic and traditional, like every year we do this on this day, are you inviting in the knowing? Or are you just doing the stuff? And I challenge a couple of religions around us are do. I see the Mormon religion is this. I see Jehovah's Witness as this. Like if you're knocking at my door telling me what to think, you're telling me what to do. You're not asking me how to feel. And so I don't think those are the pathways. This is not about more doing, the dutiful doing to get in the gates of heaven. This is about how are we doing here with who you are? And do you like you? Do you want to ask yourself those other questions? Do you want to come into your discernment place and listen differently? Some people never will. That's fine. But for those who are so uncertain, overwhelmed, constantly burnt out, knowing something needs to change, knowing that you aren't in the right career, knowing everyone would be healthier if you were out of that relationship, knowing that you can't stomach the idea of another plaid coordinated Christmas card Christmas when your marriage is actually falling apart behind the scenes, we know. And I invite you, are you ready to ask yourself, what are you lying about? Probably yelling at me that it's truth, but like, what are you lying about? Because we're lying about the truth all too often.
Are you feeling burnt out and exhausted? See you in someone who has recovered from a few burnouts herself. And through sitting in circles with women over the last 8 years, I have some perspectives as to what personality traits and habits and thinking traps perpetuate and put us at higher risk of developing and ending up in burnout. So if you want to find out your burnout archetype quiz, are you a CEO? Are you a saboteur, a martyr, a rescuer, or a zombie? Then head over to the show notes, click the free quiz, and find out what might be getting in your way. Also, learn strategies and things to consider to help you reclaim your energy and recover from burnout so that you can be blissed out in the world and doing things that make you happy. Enjoy. What was really confusing to me as a little girl is when my family dissolved and we had the perfect picture on the outside and no one fought inside the home. So when everything fell apart, I was like, what the frick just happened here? Like it was super, and my codependency on relationships really started around that time. So and I feel very connected to what you're saying, and like deeply, even my personal mission really aligns with what you're saying, because it's this, so many of us, and you're right, some people will never come to want to know this better, but that's not who I'm interested in talking with either. It's like those people who know. And I think that's a really good question. And I'm sure it's a really intimidating question for some, but what are we lying to ourselves about, right? And this world that we exist in that has this level of toleration for lukewarm, or the Christmas card thing is a perfect image of that. Or the Club Monaco thing, because man, I know I wanted that sweater too.
Right?
Okay. So I think what's unique and distinct about us at this point, from my level of understanding, is that you seem to have really come to a place where you're guiding and helping individuals do a lot of this work on their own, which I think is profound and unique and important, because there is even societally this over-reliance on needing others to work through our problems, or relying on others to fix. And I'm assuming the owl seek method and all these hours you spend outside with birds, which I find that stuff so cool in terms of like how God or source, whatever that is for people, like connects with us. But that is such a distinct feature of you and how you learned through this work. So, I know you're in communities as well. Like, obviously, you know, the value of all that and you lead communities, but you know, with the Owl Seek method, how are you helping support people become more, I don't even know if the word is correctly self-reliant, but starting to really tap into this own internal knowing?
So the very first exercise I had people do, so I ran these retreats in the Rocky Mountains, Yoho National Park, Emerald Lake, like gorgeous. It's a 5-kilometer walk around an Emerald Lake up there. And I would take people who were used to going into safe places in nature, and I'd be like, we're going to go on this silent hike. And you have to come up with a nature metaphor for your life. And I gave them a prompt, which was a word list of nature words like germinate, avalanche, flow, boulder, fish, and nature words. And they had to come up with, on this silent walk, where are you at? We do a Friday to Sunday retreat. So it's kind of like, what are you bringing? What needs to transform and change? How do you want to feel different leaving? And I'd use myself as an example. So I became a tile setter, stoneworker, second kind of career iteration, and went into construction because I love touching stones. Like the kid who loved to touch the stones and throw them in the water, who went to the Taj Mahal and can't believe white marble architecture, who ended up going to the pyramids and being like, how did they cut and move these rocks? Like, that stuff is what just lights up my world. And so when I became a tile setter, I used this analogy, nature metaphor, the diamond. So the diamond is found in the middle of a boulder, dark, time, heat, pressure to form it. When it's cracked open, it will cut you like a knife. It is rugged and rough until it is polished. So it takes this period of being polished to be beautiful. That was me coming into recovery, my life path, my trauma, my armor. I could cut you like a knife with my words, with my presence, with my physical armor, because I did not want people close. If you came close, you probably hurt me big time. My addiction journey was being held at gunpoint in a bad deal, multiple rapes, multiple times where I had to turn myself into a transaction. Like, these are horrible things that we have to come through and accept and move through, loving ourselves still. When we open that wound of the story, if it's not healed, we are still hurting. In nature, I realized everything dies to regenerate itself. So Owl Seek method has this tagline: nothing in the forest lives without the forest dying. What part of yourself needs to die off to be that regenerative new growth? So to germinate a seed, it has to go through a death in the dark soil. This is also written in Corinthians. So we've been talking about this stuff for a minute before we had the scientific biology behind it. We knew this. There was a knowing. There was a knowing that it took time in the dark first. And so what comes out of that for people is the ability to constantly, every day, for free, ask yourself, what's the nature metaphor in my life right now? Am I living in truth? Or do I feel like an avalanche that's coming down a hill today about to close off a road of destruction because I don't know what to do and I'm going to impact 40 other people with my decisions continuously? Am I a tsunami that's flooding entire communities because I'm so angry, vengeful, rageful? I work, I can see downtown Calgary from my office, and I see corporations operating on this over and over. I see people fighting to hold their financial stake in the world. I see these new currencies coming and people putting all in, and it was supposed to be something like, there's collapse and crash all over, and we need to rebuild. If we consider that something of like, I need all the pieces and rebuild it the same, we're not going through that death. So are we living a lie on truth or death? And are we living a lie on the truth of death or the lie of death? Because the truth of death is it can be regenerative and keep going. We need it. Our cells die. Our whole body is regenerated after 7 years. There's gifts in death if we see it that way. There's life in death if we see it that way. But do we have the courage to see it two ways, which is why I use the ravens and the Owl Seek method. And so it's, will you shift your perspective by seeing things differently, using nature as your guide? Because I do believe it's free around the world to use nature as your guide. Then what comes up with that, take that to your practitioner, take that to your doctor, take that to your psychologist, and dive deeper into what rises there. So when you realize, I've kind of been a tsunami. Example this weekend, a family asked me to help get their mother to treatment, a 65-year-old woman who needed to go to detox to get into treatment. Stubborn old German woman living in a multi-million-dollar house here by herself. Addiction beyond measure. The point where you're like, how does the body keep going? And I said to the son, it's time for you to go do your work now. You're a man, you own a business, you're a husband, you have a daughter. You have a responsibility right now to go talk about this maternal wound and the impact it has on you because you didn't know what that was. And the way you're talking to me is a wounded man trying to cover with this egoic mask self. Go talk about that. And I'm not the person to talk about that with. Like, that's the other piece that I see danger in some of these communities we talked about, is like that person leading is like, I'm your counselor, I'm your therapist, I'm your group lead. No. Smart people refer out and equip people to find their own resources and their own people and leave your club to go find the one that works for them. What we do when we help people on the path of healing, we help them find their answers for themselves, not in our framework.
Well, that's what I like what you said about in the beginning of the conversation, is you navigating what your healing and what your life look like, which is distinctly different than someone else, right? And I think that was a big piece of what we were trying to do in the Wild Collective as well, is that as a clinician one-on-one, sometimes you're becoming overly reliant on, systems and interventions, and it wasn't clicking for everybody, right? Like, there needed to be this depth and breadth of self-discovery first, which is, I think, exactly what you were just saying, is like, you connect with nature first, see what comes up for you, and then you're starting to make some discernment and some decisions around how you want to navigate what that looks like for yourself. And I think that's a really critical piece, because and honest.
Yes.
I think we're always trying to look as a whole, as an overly generalized statement. We're like looking for the thing that's going to work, and we hope it's going to work for everyone, and that it's all going to be that simple. And I think what you're offering is the truth, which is the only way for us to successfully, and I don't even like that word, but to in coherence with what is right for us, is to get really clear about what's coming up for us, and then finding that path and building out that strategy or plan or lifestyle.
It's more work.
Yeah.
It's more work. Like, and that's the piece.
That's right.
That you don't want
to ask what they're lying to themselves about, because they'd rather.
Exactly. This has a workbook in the back intentionally. So of course, as an entrepreneur, you're like, do I covet this? Do I keep this as something they have to sign up for? Do I need their email to get this? And it got to a place where it's like, Jill, just give it to people, because half the people won't do it. And the people who need to find it now. So these are 10 journal prompts for each one of the 7 levels. And it asks you, and each one of them is very strategically instructionally designed, that 1 is the same in each of the 7 and 10 is the same in each of the 7 for output and data I'm trying to get from people. And so for them to see themselves. So there's an instructional design methodology to this as well, because we want to make it hard. We want to go be like, I'm doing sound bowl for this, and then I'm going to go silence for this, and then I'm going to do this liver cleanse over here. And it's like, but what's the whole piece? My ex-husband used to introduce me as, this is Jill, she likes workshops, because he couldn't understand why I was constantly seeking more information and more about myself. That doesn't always make sense to other people. I also was like seeking, not doing anything with the work in that time.
Yes.
The truth is, we probably needed to work on the marriage, which is why I'm divorced. The truth is, I was in this outwardly seeking, what does Jill need? Forgetting that Venn diagram for relationship is Jill, your partner, and then the middle is the relationship. I didn't have that as a priority. So in reflecting on that, I was like, even in doing the workshops, I was outwardly chasing, right? Just, it's got to be more. What I found fascinating in using this as like just a symbol, if this is a mountain, I took a tech entrepreneur on the 5-kilometer walk around Emerald Lake, and I write about him in here. And he reflected on seeing the mountain. And he was like, I've been trying to take this path with my team. I need to come back down, cross over here, and take this path. And the mountain itself had like these different bumps on it. And he made each of those a milestone and a hurdle to cover to get to the next place. But the imagery of seeing it differently, attaching a metaphor to it, turning it into a plan, an actionable plan that has milestone steps and goals, is what this asks you to do. And that's how that's my day-to-day right now. I did a 8 a.m. walk with a friend. She used to be a psychologist. She left psychology And we went and walked the river this morning. I overlooked the Bow River here in Calgary. That force and flow of the water finding its way as 3/4 of the river is still frozen. Like, we made metaphors of that. Our kids are teenagers going to different academies, boarding schools. We're talking about, we had this river idea for how it would go. And right now is spring breakup kind of thing. The river's forcing its own way through, and the current's under, of course, and it will thaw. But right now the path is not the path. And we have to remember to even see that differently. Some of those parts where like it's still frozen and the water's flowing underneath, but if you were to walk this way, you wouldn't know you're on a shelf that could break and fall. So are you even seeing the whole thing differently? Are you looking at the whole perspective, your risk and danger seasonally for yourself in your life? This could be like crushing 100 mini chocolate bars every October 1st when you buy them for Halloween, and then you're like eating them and then putting them in the bathroom and taking toilet paper and covering it so nobody else in your family sees that like every October you do this. So like, what's the breakup, so to speak, for that behavior? That's probably a lot of client work with people in your program, is like, why are we hurting ourselves with food? Why are we hurting ourselves with trauma? Why are we hurting ourselves with our thoughts that then outwardly put this mask on we don't even like? The mask is a lie then.
This mask thing is interesting to me. What do I want to say about it? Why do we do this?
So I used to do that with mini chocolate bars. Let me just out myself here. And it's because I was so ashamed of like having the hard conversation of like, I don't like myself in this marriage. So I'd go in the bathroom to hurt myself in this marriage. And then that begs the question, why couldn't I just tell the truth?
I know. Why?
So the mask is the inability to tell the truth. And the mask is societal conforming. And the mask is religious conforming. The mask is marriage conforming. The mask is, did we do the pre-work or just dive in?
You know, you talk about, I know, you know, we don't talk a lot about religion and stuff on the podcast per se, but these conversations dominate often in my house about, you know, my husband was raised as a Catholic, and similar experience of hearing the Lord's Prayer every day and not understanding it. Everything was for him an autopilot experience. And now he's having his own journey of really unpacking all that and trying to truly understand. But it's, you know, a lot of our society operates at that capacity. And so there is no, like, I wonder, you know, what's interesting to me is how some of us are plagued with wanting to know more about this, or like are deeply curious as to why we're like this, right?
Yes.
Like this incongruence of like, because I obviously have my mask stuff too. I obviously have my emotional eating or sabotage things too. I've had to confront things in my marriage where, yes, like I can actually relate to the like going out and seeking workshops instead of actually having those conversations. And I'm, you know, grateful in my side of it that's different and unique, but like that we're still together kind of working through those pieces. It's so fascinating to me, you know, and I think that's why, like, I don't even need everyone to have the answer, but I crave to have these kind of conversations. How did this all happen? Because I grew up in a situation where things were very surface level and very like the outside world thought one thing. And I was a very confused teenager. Like something isn't adding up and I can feel it in my body. I feel it in my body and it feels very destabilizing. And so I got called a lot of names because I acted in response to what was coming up in my body, but I had no way of communicating. This feels really uncomfortable. So it would come out in rage. And
you reacted.
Yes, I was reacting.
Right? Like we're not even acting, because acting's like, I know what I'm doing. Here's the script. I'm doing it. But like we're reacting. And that's a beast. Like that's an unhinged dog ran, ripped the leash off the pole. Different rewilding.
I talk about it in Wild Circles. Something came up to me recently where when I first met my husband, I thought the reason I felt so comfortable with him is that he has his own journey and his own rock bottom moment. And I felt like maybe why I feel safe is that he's so non-judgmental. But I actually think it was such honesty that there was no need for masks. Like it was like very disarming, and I couldn't handle that. Like it was really shocking to me, but in the most surprising and wonderful way.
Yeah. So it's almost like you were waiting for the disappointment
For many years. This episode is brought to you by the Wild Collective. If you are ready for something innovative, something truly transformational. You are wanting to build a beautiful life and thriving health and vibrant energy, and you're not sure how to build that in, you might want to consider something as incredible as the Wild Collective. The Wild Collective is our women's health initiative. It is a closed community of like-minded individuals. It is where sisterhood meets self-care. There's 10 modules of fundamental women's health, all the evidence-based information that you need, the testing, the handouts, the assessment, how to advocate for yourself in the wellness space. Also, what natural and integrative approaches you can consider for any age and stage in life. And being that it is part of a community, you also get this beautiful experience of meaningful connection, conversations that matter, and truly up-leveling your life. So if you are ready to take on something totally transformative and fun, then please go check us out at the Wild Collective. So that's the-wild-collective.com. Get on the wait list, and we will see you in one of our wild circles very soon.
Yeah. And that's the piece is do we have the courage to shift our perspective on what we didn't know we were anticipating happening? And we need these conversations to be turns out that's what I thought it was. When we understand that memorized religion is not faith,
right,
it's a different conversation. And some women cannot have that conversation in some religious communities. For myself, the most damaging information came from there because there's, in some churches, a belief system reconciliation is the only way when a marriage breaks down. And I sat with a pastor who was telling me this, and I was like, they already live together. What are you asking me to shed of myself to do you want me to go be the burning bush, light myself on fire in front of their house so that they, what are you saying to me? Because that's physically what it felt like you want me to do. That is not a trauma-informed response. That is not a consideration and care for my journey as a woman response. That is not a journey of somebody who just saw something they didn't want to see response. That is a memorized religious response. And furthermore, that body of Christianity doesn't allow any women leadership. So I will not touch a church that doesn't allow women leadership. You must be kidding me. So we're talking about religion, organized religion, or we're talking about centers of faith. And we really need to understand what those are because women cannot heal. A lot of men cannot heal actually in the organized religion bodies either. Working in a men's treatment center, the number of men affected by sexual assault as a child was 3 and 4. Why are we not talking about this? Why are we not talking about it came through sports and organized religious bodies? Why are we not comfortable putting this on the table more so they can heal? We're still putting on these masks of how to societally turn up, even though that story is so necessary to change. In this journey of taking off the mask, you might have to change the building you go to. You might have to change the group of friends you consult with. You might have to change a whole lot of things, which means when we set boundaries and we change, people don't know how to deal with us. They don't know if they accept it or not. Then there's this whole other level of what becoming more isolated means in that place. And there's so many nets we need to catch people when we ask them to actually dive in and do this work or make sure they're aware that they're going to need new nets. Because asking people to do this walk doesn't come with comfort and conformity of the world that they're exiting out of at all. And it is a different conversation for men. It is a different conversation for women, and it is a different conversation for people. And with all due respect, we need to respect that. So we also need that discernment in ourselves is where is this coming from? I know a male Catholic traditional person is probably not who to talk about for the trauma to my womb that required a hysterectomy because of choices of my past. Wrong go-to, wrong audience. So in knowings, I'm asking you if that's the one place you've been going, are you willing to shift your perspective that maybe you need a different teacher for this next part? And I think when you were asking before, not everybody's for us, they're not. But do people who are at home, spinning, unable to sleep, hormones are through the roof because they're coping in the only way they know how, which is grabbing whatever's in the house. Maybe it's a bottle, maybe it's sugar. Maybe it's sugar that's become like a cocaine addiction. I certainly know that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Are we letting them know? There's another thing that maybe they can dive into, not pushing that on them. This is not promotion. This is like, hey, if you want to talk about this, here's some circles to talk about this. But we're not your new governance body. We're here to facilitate the conversation.
Right.
And set you on your way. But you're going to need a notebook, put together that board of directors of your life. Who are your people? I'd love to talk to you about who your people are, but like, don't make it me.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. And so a word that keeps coming up, and I would like to understand, but for you is one of the key, if not the key characteristic to be courageous, to have courage. Is that the thing you think, like it's being overly reductionistic, but the thing that is a requirement to be able to walk this path? Because I think this is a pretty confronting, intimidating thing for a lot of people. Like, to be asked the question, where are you lying?
Okay, this is going to blow your mind.
I love it. Okay, let's do it.
So what I did when I started this book was I started a spreadsheet and I wrote down all the 7 things in the world. There's 7 chakras. There's 7 levels of this. Islam makes 7 this. Christianity makes 7 this. Catholicism has the 7 deadly sins. Is that even published, or did people just make that shit up? Like, where are we starting with the 7? And I just put it all together. There's 7 virtues in Catholicism. Like there's all these signs that we can start with. So it came out like a hierarchical spreadsheet, and it goes from fear to love. So it kind of goes from like your 0 to your 7, let's say. Your 1 to 7. And then I decided, wait a minute, I'm going to grab a sheet and show you. I think that is one of the prescriptive ways that society has put us to believe, do the 0 to 7, gold star, you're done forever.
Love that.
And like, let's check out with that. So then this thing happened for me where I was driving to the Crow's Nest Pass and an eagle flew beside my car window, and the eagle then landed. I have a video of it. It's 6 minutes long. It landed a few feet from my car and it started to fly. And it flew, and then it flew over my car. And then it flew over the 4 lanes of the highway. And then it flew, and the spiral, just like the Fibonacci sequence, kept getting wider and greater and more expansive. And I thought, and then it disappeared into the sun way over there. And I was like, not understanding why this hierarchical ladder model was not working for me, even though it worked for hundreds of people who came to see me. Like, I can teach it. Like, we're so used to that, right? Like, and then I'd be like, but that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. So then I redefined it. And this is not clear right now, but it is a sequence. And each one of the 7 data points is represented on here. Sorry, it's just the blur of the camera. The tree of life is behind here. And the tree of life's behind all of it. That notion of compost, nothing in the forest lives without the forest dying, is everything below here. So fear, pride and ego, and courage. Then I made the next one on the hierarchical ladder, which is the center of the hierarchy, the knowings, actually the end point here. So if an idea comes from our heart-centered place and goes out into the world, is it passing through each one of these 7? Or if an idea comes in from the world, it actually goes through the reverse order. Do we pass it through fear, pride and ego, courage, to have some kind of forgiveness and grace, to love the idea and allow it into our knowing heart-centered place? When I have an idea, like my book I wrote, it started with a knowing heart-centered place in the heart of the nest, just like the trees in the Crow's Nest Pass had. And I have to love the idea and have grace to feel differently from being like all the other authors in the world, to forgive myself for not conforming and being just like everyone else, and have the courage to push through my pride and ego and get out of the cage of conformity and get it out to the world. That eagle presented that level, presented that way of seeing things differently, presented permission for me to have it hierarchical as psychology and everybody wants me to have it, or intuitively know if I turn it into the spiral, I'm not looking from the nest down on my life, bird's eye view. If that eagle just looks down in that Fibonacci sequence it created for me, it has an end and it turns into a spin cycle that then turns into like a tunnel in the ground. That's where we spin out of control. So do you have permission for yourself to come see the tree from this angle and look at the tree and see this ever widening, expansive sequence. Also, the eagle then represented for me intentionality, and love has to be intentionality. There's nowhere to land, nowhere to go, nothing to eat. It elusively flew to the light. When we surrender, we have to surrender to elusively let go and surrender to the light. Otherwise, our perspective comes back to the bird's eye view and we're just looking down and we're spinning out of control.
You're
That's
blowing my mind. Or if you've ever, I wouldn't have, but if you've ever heard me talk about surrender, I always say the reason it was so frightening to me is because I said I felt like I was falling into a black hole of abyss, exactly what you just described.
Mm-hmm. When I had my hysterectomy, I said it was birthing a black ball of hate. Same thing. Like, we have to surrender it out in that kind of like birthing idea, like to like back to like the core of the earth to burn, metaphorically, away. And it's a piece that comes with prayer. Like, do with as thy will. Like, God, do with as thy will. Like, take this from me. I don't even want to know what you turn it into.
I'm going to ask one selfish question. Because you weren't on our last coaching call when I asked this, and I really needed you to be there.
Yesterday.
I struggle with this idea of really having, like, for me, a growing relationship with God, but also really being strongly attuned to talking about intuition and going in with self. And it sounds like you have a really beautiful way in which you've blend. No, maybe you know the answer, but how does that look for you? Do you know what I'm asking? Going into self versus a reliance on a higher power?
For me, the answer is clearly what happened in the world. So in the year 300, when Catholicism was formed, it was formed as a tax agreement, tax structure for Constantine, the Roman Empire, and Christians. There was a fear that this group of people who were kind and nice and just making their way and spreading out were going to do something. So we better tax them. So when taxation came, it came as a power and control piece, and that was the birth of Catholicism. Like, if we want to break it down historically, yes, I will be raked by theologians who will give me these other reasons it needed to happen. Okay, well, let's just talk about history in another lens. So that also meant that the power and control became monetary, and it became for land. It's like the game of Risk. So we're seeing it again right now. And it's complete dominance of an idea, of people, and of money, and putting borders around it. The female intuition was a massive threat at that time. So when we look into the stories of Mary Magdalene, who in some stories were right alongside Jesus in these stories, the logic and the intuition piece, when that was written out and then thereafter apologized for, it was Pope Gregory who felt that that story of Mary Magdalene's power was too much. It was cast then that she was a prostitute. This is documented. The apology from the Catholic Church came thereafter. What she did have was an intuitive self. What she did have was an intuitive knowing. If you read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the pages we have, so they are surfacing again from the Nag Hammadi Desert. They're in clay jars. We're still missing the first 7 pages of her gospel because they were deemed to be so dangerous that we had to get rid of them. The pages we do have and the theories that have come out of them, it's purely just about knowing, which is why my book's called Knowings. So to resolve this is to dissolve the theories you've made truth. Beliefs are formed when we decide a collection of thoughts are true. So when we decide a new collection of thoughts are true, we can change. Now, churches don't want that. Our direct deposit membership and our pathway to heaven by having our donation to church on direct deposit every Sunday depends on us staying there, depends on us not questioning it, depends on us not challenging why there's no female leadership. Until we say, I'm cutting that and I'm going to do this exploration of what it is for me. Where I find people get off the path is when they don't start rooted in a monotheistic light source. So if we're going seeking what is the light in the dark and we're not starting from a monotheistic light source, this is what will make some people not want to follow me. And that's okay. I do believe that light source was there before we wrote religious code over top of it. And I do believe we're coming back to what was always there before religious code was written over top of it. And so societal structure here in Alberta, you still check off on your taxes. Do I want my money to go to public or separate school system? Separate school systems of the Catholic Church. I send my kids to a Christian school and it's considered a private school. So because I don't want the Catholic indoctrination and the Catholic texts and formation of that tradition, ritual, and structure to be taught, I pay for a different school. This is the rewilding of the woman's intuition, is finding the environments it's allowed to come up in. So there's this idea at the end of a service where you take that metal candle snuffer. That's what's been happened to our intuition in men and women. So we have all this commentary about men who come out and their intuition's rising. We'll talk about his Lulu pants. We'll talk about his free time. We'll talk about how he let his hair go, maybe wears a ponytail. Like, we'll talk about all the things outside of the thing that's coming back up. And that's because it's so uncomfortable to talk about still. I think it's happening. Think those of us who know what it is, it's happening. I have very big tech clients, corporate clients, oil and gas. And like, we talk about this stuff in the office. It's not in the company newsletter, but it is on their heart. And it's still a very hard conversation to talk against the church, so to speak. But what is the church? Like, we don't have a unified central. Like, I look out over this expansiveness that I see, and I see Catholic churches and Christian churches. I see Sikh churches. I see this new, Mormon temple glowing on the hill. Like, everybody's promoting and advertising differently. And then I see the dark, dark, dark Jehovah's Witness buildings that don't have windows. And I'm like, who goes to a place with no windows? Like, there's just, people have choice of community center. So I've just translated it to community center. And what community center do you want to join? Where do you want your membership to be? And what are you getting from that membership? And sadly, I think that's what churches have become. People will be shamed to leave when the leader leaves because they're not part of the community. It's like, well, was it for the leader or the community? Like, we still have this problem, the body. But people are more empowered with choice. Intuition is not welcome in every environment. And if you feel that rising, in my methodology, it's the figure 8 infinity symbol, logic and intuition. The nest is where logic and intuition meet. When you understand you have a balance of both, you make decisions knowing you have both. But if we haven't been talking about it, and people haven't learned what that word means, if people have cast it off as being, that's what you do when you're in law of attraction and you're in this, like, I see law of attraction as another just forced way of getting something, like a predetermined psychology theory, like you already have an outcome. And so I challenge that manifesting is something that's co-creation between you and God, or that light source, whatever you call it, and you in the universe, and you decide, here's what I'm going to ask for, but I'm going to trust that they'll deliver what I need. And then that's just a different way of also receiving what intuition gives you, because it's a very long journey to be like, I want to manifest this and it's going to look like this, and then letting that go. Because you don't actually get to decide what you want.
Yeah.
Like, you can put it out there.
My mind for a really long time.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it's trust.
Right.
So women, we haven't trusted the environments we've been in. We haven't trusted the men we've been around. We haven't trusted the women who have patriarchal puppeteered their way to be just like that energy in some corporate role. What we're really working on right now is trust. And we can't forget that, like, those things that are distracting of destination require a lot of journeying. And that doesn't have a timeline.
I respect that answer. Thank you. I could keep you here all day, but I'm not going to, because I'm sure you have a lot of things to do. I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What books are currently on your nightstand?
Right now is my friend's book from Winnipeg about the death of his son. He died of an overdose, actually, with me here in Calgary, and he wrote about me in this. So this is the one I'm getting through right now. And Scott Oak is Hockey Night in Canada, CBC presenter. I have the Bible on my nightstand. I read the Psalms. I try to get information from there. And that's it. One book and one holy source.
One thing that brings you joy.
Walking outside.
That should have been a pretty good answer. I guess that. Who do you admire most?
Those who want to have hard conversations.
Good answer. Fill in the blank. Community is
necessary and ever changing.
Advice you wish someone gave you 5 years ago.
You're going to have to dive deeply into what partnership versus companionship means for you.
Best word to describe you.
Wild.
I like you. I think you are a really, really awesome human. And I knew I was going to like you from the second I heard you speak. You're an incredibly introspective and intelligent woman. And I really appreciate your time here and sharing your wisdom that you've learned with your book. I can't wait to read it. I actually have some ideas I'll share with you after about sharing your work with the community that I serve, because I think your work is really important and necessary, and in a really essential part of what we're trying to do is the self part, the part with nature, the part with it needs to be a part for everybody. So in saying that, how do people find you, connect you, order your book, all of the things, work with you one-on-one? Because I know you do offer that as well.
Yeah, JillDrader.com is just the little online resume snapshot of me. Owlseek.ca is the page where you can click and buy the book from Chapters Indigo online in Calgary, or you can message me and I can send it out to you. That is also just how to connect with me. Best ways through just Instagram, and let's just start a conversation through there, right?
I love that. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Wild Medicine. I am so grateful to have you here, and I hope you're feeling inspired and empowered. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more incredible women just like you. And before you go, quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please consult with your healthcare provider for personalized advice and care. And if you're ready to take inspired action and dive deeper into your own health journey, please visit us at poppyclinic.com. Let's rewild and reset your health together.